You open your phone. One comment, one sentence, and just like that, your peace is gone. Not because the words were true, but because they got to you. And that's all it takes, isn't it? They don't need to punch you, shout at you, or even confront you in person. They just need you to flinch, to react, to lose your center for even a second. Welcome to the real battlefield. Not a war of fists, but a war of opinions. A war of silence. Of glances sharper than knives. This is psychological warfare. The kind that leaves no visible wounds but carves deep into your sense of self. And if you don't know the rules of this game, if you've already lost without realizing it, you live in a world engineered to provoke you to pull at your emotions and fracture your focus. Clickbait headlines, pointless arguments, and praise laced with passive aggression. Everything is a trap. Everyone is fishing for your attention. And in this attention economy, your reaction is the currency. Because if they can make you react, they get to write the story, your story. But here's what they never told you. In a world addicted to chaos, calm is an act of rebellion. If you don't shout, if you don't explain, if you don't even blink, you become unpredictable. And in this noisy world, the unpredictable are the most dangerous of all. They won't admit it, but your silence, it terrifies them. It reflects something they can't control, and worse, something they can't even understand. You were taught to be nice, to be kind, to nod and agree. But were you ever taught how to stay grounded when everything around you is shaking? When the noise grows louder and the world claws at your attention? No, because society doesn't teach that. You're not here to be reactive. You're here to remember who you are. To reclaim what they keep trying to hijack, your emotional sovereignty. You don't fight chaos by making more noise. You win by being still while everything else around you trembles. This video, it won't teach you how to argue better. It will teach you something far more valuable, how to never need to. Because the most powerful person in any room, in any confrontation, is not the one who yells the loudest. It's the one who doesn't move, and yet moves everyone else. Don't react. Don't explain. Govern. You were never taught how to truly defend yourself, only how to feel. Since childhood, you were praised for being quiet. You were told you were so mature for not speaking up. Being agreeable earned you smiles. Expressing pain earned you silence.
Ow.
You learned to trade your voice for validation. But no one told you the price. No one told you that every unspoken word becomes an internal scream. That every time you choose peace over your self-respect, you're teaching yourself to disappear. Here's the truth they never said out loud. Every time you react out of emotion, you hand over control. Not just control over that moment, but control over your image, your reputation, your future. Emotion, though deeply human, is also currency. And in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon used against you. That's why manipulators don't yell. They whisper. They poke. They leave comments crafted not to offend, but to unsettle. It's just enough to make you reveal your cards. It's just enough to make you bleed. Because if you bleed, they know exactly where to press next. Picture this. You're in a meeting. The room is quiet, formal, filled with artificial smiles. Then someone makes a subtle jab, a carefully chosen line, just vague enough to deny, but sharp enough to sting. It questions your competence, your value, ... disguised as a joke. You feel it, that sudden heat rising in your face, the tight pressure forming in your chest, your heart rate subtly increasing. It's barely visible from the outside, but inside, the fire's been lit. Now pause. This is the crossroads. You can speak, you can defend yourself, you can fire back a clever retort, and feel like you've won the moment. But in doing so, you risk losing something far more important, the war. Because the moment you react emotionally, they've got you. The hidden game. They've now learned your trigger. They know you can be moved, and therefore, you can be controlled. Think of a battlefield. What happens to the first soldier who panics, who fires blindly without reading the terrain, who charges ahead before understanding the enemy's position? He's always the first one to fall. And sadly, most people move through life the same way on emotional autopilot. They expend their energy in all directions, desperately hoping someone notices their pain, their worth, their need to be acknowledged. You might believe you're strong because you always speak up, because you never let anything slide, because you always set the record straight. But if your version of strength is based entirely on reaction, then it's not really strength, it's exposure. What's exposed can be studied, tracked, and manipulated. The more reactive you are, the more predictable you become. And what's predictable is controllable. This is where true calm becomes terrifying. Because the calm person, the one who doesn't flinch, who doesn't rise to bait, who doesn't even blink, that person becomes unreadable. And in a world that survives by pressing your buttons, being unreadable isn't just mysterious, it's power. You may think silence is weak, passive even, but silence, in its purest form, is strategic ambiguity. It introduces doubt, creates tension. It's a presence that holds an entire room hostage. Most people aren't truly afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your silence, because silence reflects. It doesn't distract. It confronts. It forces others to sit in their own discomfort, without your emotional energy to shield them from it. That is the battlefield they never expected to walk into, where the strongest punch is the one that never lands because it never needed to. You think you're proving your strength by reacting? But Machiavelli would say this: a man who cannot govern himself cannot govern others. And self-governance begins not in grand gestures, but in small, invisible moments. In the 2 seconds before you open your mouth, in the 1 second before you raise your eyebrow, in the half second before your heart skips forward. It begins with a choice. Ask yourself, how many times have you handed away your power just to feel seen for 5 seconds? How many times have you spoken from your wound instead of from your wisdom? Because every provocation is a test of your intelligence, not of your sharp tongue or clever opinions, but a test of your axis, your emotional center. And until you learn to stand firmly on that axis, unwavering, no title, no degree, no amount of knowledge or success will be able to protect you. Because they won't come at you with fists. They'll come with something much subtler. A casual suggestion, a joke with sharp edges, a compliment laced with poison. All designed to make you break your center. And when that moment comes, don't. Fight for dominance. Don't let the ego take the wheel. Just breathe, just pause. Let the silence speak on your behalf. Because the person who reacts is controlled. But the person who pauses is king. And if this resonates with something deep inside you, if you've ever felt that familiar ache of giving your power away just to be noticed, then like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks reacting equals strength, because they deserve to know. The real power is in the pause. The one who speaks fast, the one who speaks the most wins. That's what they told us, that dominance belongs to the voice that echoes loudest, that whoever fills the room with their words controls it. Let's be honest, that's not strength. That's performance. That's theater. That's carefully rehearsed noise, dressed up as power. It doesn't beg for attention or scramble for approval. It doesn't rush to be heard or hurry to be understood. True strength doesn't chase the room. It owns it, not by force, but by stillness. It chooses silence not as a retreat, not as absence, but as domination. Because silence has a weight that forces others to confront themselves. And the truth is, most people can't survive even a moment of that. Look around, really look. Everyone is trying to be louder, faster, more visible. Everyone wants their voice to cut through the noise. But how many dare to sit in the silence? How many are willing to let stillness speak? Very few. Because stillness is uncomfortable. Stillness echoes, reflects. It mirrors back the thoughts you've been avoiding, the truths you've tried to outrun. That's where the real power lives. Not in what's said, but in what isn't. The louder you get, the more you reveal. The faster you respond, the easier you are to map. And once people can map you, they can use you. Predictable people aren't leaders. They're tools, used, played, directed. Power doesn't lie in volume. lies in the effect you create. When you say nothing at all, think about it. Really think. The generals who win wars aren't the ones shouting commands on the front lines. They're the ones standing on the ridge above the chaos, observing everything, waiting, calculating, seeing what no one else sees. Because when everyone else is talking, the one who listens rules. You've seen it before in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in politics, in personal conversations. The people who remain still, composed, unreadable, they bend outcomes without lifting a single finger. Why? Because stillness makes people uneasy, and unease is leverage. They can study you, track your rhythm, predict your moves. But when you're unreadable, when you move in silence, you become like a storm behind a sealed door. Everyone feels it building. No one knows when it will strike. That's why the calm are feared in moments of conflict. Not because they are weak, but because they are unpredictable. And unpredictability is the purest form of power. They can't control what they can't decode. You can't fight what refuses to react. You don't have to shout to dominate a room. You don't have to prove anything with volume. Sometimes real authority walks in, says nothing, and lets presence do the talking. Let the tension rise. Let their nervousness fill the silence. Watch as they stumble over their own need to explain, justify, or validate. That's when you know you've already won. But don't confuse silence with passivity. Never mistake. Calm for softness. Silence is a blade, razor sharp, quiet, and lethal in the right hands. When you learn how to wield it, you no longer react. You decide. Machiavelli understood this. He once wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good. He must know when to use cruelty and when to appear kind, appear not be, because appearance shapes perception, and perception shapes everything. So let them call you cold. Let them say you're distant. Let them whisper that you're hard to read. Let them misunderstand you. That's the strategy. Because what they fear, they attack. And what they attack without understanding, they can never defeat. And that's the point. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be respected, to be remembered, to be unshakable. So let the loud fight each other. Let them burn in their need to be heard. Let them clash in the arena of noise, struggling to outshout one another. Desperate for attention, for validation, for control. You stay still. You stay calm. You stay quiet. And in that stillness, you become the one they cannot predict. The one who makes others uneasy without saying a word. Because when strength looks like silence, even if you say nothing at all, your silence becomes the loudest presence in the room. Control isn't about overpowering others. It's not about dominance through intimidation or volume. Control is direction, not the direction of crowds, but the direction of yourself. Because in every confrontation, the true battlefield isn't between you and the other person. It's between you and your own impulses. And whoever wins that internal war wins everything else. It's the real test, not of how strong you are in words, but how centered you are in silence. You may think you're being tested by others, but you're not. The truth is harsher. You're being tested by yourself, by the voice inside that still wants to react, still wants to shout, to defend, to be right. That part of you that still clings to ego and demands the last word. That's the battlefield where most people fall. Not from weakness, but from lack of discipline. Because they confuse noise with influence and reaction with relevance. Here's what most never realize. Every provocation is a trap, a setup. And the real question is not, are you strong enough to fight back? The deeper question is, are you strong enough to stay still when everything inside you is begging to explode? Imagine this. You're in a crowded room. Someone throws shade, an insult, a veiled attack, and all eyes turn to you. Everyone is watching, waiting, expecting. The room holds its breath, and you do nothing. No flinch, no fire, no fury, just stillness. You look not with fear, not with anger, but with unwavering clarity. A calm that cuts through the noise like a blade. That moment, because the most terrifying thing in that room isn't what you say. It's your refusal to break character. That's not suppression. That's control, self-control. Because people who can't govern themselves will always try to provoke, manipulate, and bait others into reaction. They test you not because they're strong, but because they want to see if you are weak. And if you hand over your energy, your voice, your attention, you've already lost. But here's the secret. You don't owe them anything. Your reaction, not your explanation, not your presence, and certainly not your peace. Stop giving your power away so cheaply. Silence is not weakness. It's a weapon. It's a mirror. And when you hold it up to someone, they don't see you. They see themselves. That's why they panic. They didn't come looking for truth. They came looking for a fight. And in not giving it, you shattered the script they were counting on. They expected you to rage. They expected you to plead. They expected you to defend your ground. But you didn't, and that terrifies them. Because in that moment, they no longer know who you are. And when they can't define you, they can't control you. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Not through threats, not through words, but through the stillness that unmasks the chaos within others. And it's not just about arguments. This dynamic shows up everywhere in your closest relationships, in boardroom meetings, in family dinners. But when you don't play the part, when you don't give them the script they expect, the power shifts. Suddenly, the director realizes the play was never theirs. You've been writing the story the whole time. That's what calm does. It doesn't engage in the fight. It rewrites the rules. It looks straight into the chaos and says, "You don't control my rhythm. You don't dictate my response. See? You, and that's enough." That quiet acknowledgement, not of agreement, but of presence, is a silent refusal. It's a rejection of the emotional game, a quiet stand in the middle of noise. And the longer you hold your ground unshaken, the more the dynamic begins to shift. The room bends around your stillness. People stop pulling you into their orbit, and instead, they begin to rotate around yours. You're no longer reacting to the room reacts to you. You want to know what true power feels like? It's not found in shouting matches or quick retorts, standing face to face with chaos and not flinching. It's witnessing someone's attempt to provoke you and choosing with absolute clarity not to blink. Because in that pause, in that steady breath you take before doing nothing, is where power quietly lives. That kind of self-control doesn't just reshape how the world sees you. It rewires how you see yourself. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing rejection. You stop molding yourself to fit into frames that were never meant to hold you. You become your own standard. You don't rise in defense. You rise in presence. In silence, and in a world obsessed with noise, validation. In performance, that silence becomes deafening. Here's the part no one talks about. The ego doesn't fear being wrong. It fears being invisible. It's not about winning arguments. It's about being acknowledged, being seen. That's why silence drives so many people to madness. Because silence isn't just an absence of words. It's the death of the ego's voice. And when the ego isn't being fed, it starts to starve. You've seen it before, haven't you? Someone attacks you. Maybe in public, maybe online, maybe in the quiet corners of private life, but always with an audience.
Ow.
Their goal isn't truth, it's reaction. They want to watch your ego rise like a fire. They want to feel your emotional defenses activate. They want to see you flinch. But what happens when you don't? What happens when you simply look with no anger, no fear, no rush to explain or defend? What happens when all you offer is stillness, presence, breath? The ego inside them begins to unravel. Like a starved beast, it turns inward and begins to consume itself. Because ego thrives on escalation, it feeds on emotional chaos. It needs to explain, it needs to argue, it needs to win. But you're no longer in that arena. You've stepped out of the ring. You're watching from above now. And that change in altitude changes everything. Because you're no longer defending your ego, you're dismantling theirs. Stillness is unsettling. Because it reflects. It's a mirror that exposes. It reveals what people have been hiding beneath all their noise, their insecurity, their need for control, their fear of insignificance. And most people aren't ready to see that. They've never stopped long enough to face it. Never sat alone with the truth in silence. So what do when you stay calm? They break. They ghost. They storm out. They explode, not because you were cruel, but because you were calm. And in a world driven by emotional chaos, calm is the most violent mirror you can hold up to someone. It shows them everything they're running from, everything they can't. You've defended yourself in conversations that didn't deserve your energy. That's conditioning. That's being human. But it's also the very reason that, even after the argument ended, even after you won, you still felt hollow. You still felt empty? Why you still felt wrong after being right? Because the ego never wants peace. It doesn't crave stillness or resolution, it craves stimulation. It always wants the next battle, the next performance, the next round of applause. It's never satisfied, never silent. And that's the trap. You keep fighting, thinking you're defending truth, but you're really feeding the ego's addiction. So here's the shift. Here's where everything changes. The moment you stop reacting to protect the ego, you begin acting. To protect your energy, you stop proving your worth to people who've already decided not to see it. You stop over-explaining yourself in rooms where your silence would have said more. You no longer perform to be understood. You live to be at peace. Begin to realize something most people never learn. You can care deeply and still choose to walk away. You can feel everything without losing yourself in the process. That's where detachment becomes elegance. Not abandonment, not indifference alignment. You don't detach because you're numb. You detach because you finally learned the cost of feeling too much for people who never intended to hold that feeling with care. For those who only wanted to feed off it. Because when you're reactive, you're not making choices, you're being chosen. Chosen by their moods, their chaos, their instability. But when you detach with awareness, something powerful happens. You regain choice. You decide what's worth your energy, your breath, your presence. You choose when to speak, when to stay, when to walk. That's not disconnection. That's evolution. That's growth with roots. You don't stop feeling. You just stop folding. You don't stop giving. You stop leaking. And in that space, in that restraint, you don't become colder. You become clearer. Clear on what you allow. Clear on what you protect. Clear on who you are when no one else is pulling your strings. Tugging at your emotions, demanding your reactions. That's not ego, it's mastery. But let's be honest, being calm sounds noble, even admirable, until you start paying the price for it. Not because you wounded them, but because you stopped letting them manipulate your emotional landscape. You stopped justifying your boundaries, stopped defending your intentions. You stopped playing a game that was never meant to serve you, and suddenly you're the problem. They say you've changed. You've become distant, cold. But here's the truth. You didn't change. You simply stopped leaking energy into conversations that drained you. You stopped begging for validation from people who only valued the emotional version of you. They could influence you became calm, and that calm, that unwavering presence, it unsettled them. They were looking for control, and the way they held that control was through chaos. So when you no longer reacted, when you didn't panic, didn't chase, didn't respond on coup, broke the pattern, and when the pattern breaks, they fall apart. Because your emotional reaction was their structure. It was the scaffolding holding up their sense of power. Without your reaction, there's nothing left. No frame to lean on, play to act in. That's the cost of calm. It's not just silence. It's the lonelier path marked by quiet exits, misunderstood boundaries. In relationships that end not in fire, but in fading. People don't always leave because you were unkind. Often they leave because you became unreadable. And they can't manipulate what they can't decode. But don't confuse their departure with your failure. Don't see their silence as punishment. A necessary, painful clarity that reveals who was with you and who was only with your reaction. A way to separate those who are feeding off your instability from those who truly saw you. And yes, it hurts. Sometimes more than words can explain. You'll question yourself in quiet moments. You'll feel guilt creeping in like a fog. You'll wonder if you were too firm, if you should have softened your stance, bent a little more. said something different. But hold on to this truth. Machiavelli once said, "He who builds his house on the applause of others built it on sand." And he was right. Let the waves come. Let the noise rise. Let people walk away. Not here to be palatable. You don't need everyone to like you. You only need to live with yourself when the world is silent and the room is empty. Right there is real peace. To make no mistake, it's rare. Most people don't seek peace. They seek distraction. They thrive on attention. They live off noise, the arguments, the drama, the loops of validation that keep them spinning. You don't. Not anymore. Because your calm is no longer a weakness. It's your resistance. It's your quiet defiance in a world addicted to reaction. You no longer flinch at provocation. You no longer give your energy to people who haven't earned the right to hold it. And that makes you dangerous in all the right ways. So when you changed the rules. You stopped playing the emotional games. You stepped off the field and started writing a new playbook, one built on presence, not performance. And the best part? You did it without losing your humanity. You didn't go cold. It just became clear. There's a lie they tell that if you detach, you must be cold, uncaring, heartless. And if you stop responding, it means you've stopped loving. But that's not detachment. That's disconnection. And the two couldn't be more different. True detachment isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. Standing in the heat of raw feeling and refusing to let it burn through your reasoning. You still love, but you no longer abandon yourself to do it. You no longer chase people who treat your worth like it's seasonal or negotiable. This is where emotional maturity begins. Not in how loud you argue, but in how quiet you remain when someone tries to provoke you. Not in how quickly you fire back, but in how deeply you breathe before deciding whether the moment is even worth a response. Because in real detachment, you don't stop being human. You become fully human, fully awake, fully sovereign. You stop letting old wounds speak. On your behalf, you stop letting outdated scripts write your present. And yes, people will notice. Some will call you distant. But what they're really saying is this. They no longer know how to reach you in the ways that used to work. They no longer have access to the levers they used to pull. The buttons they used to press now do nothing, because now you're centered. You're no longer reacting, you're observing. You've come to understand that not every emotion needs to be voiced. Not every trigger deserves a reaction. This is where you stop leaking, where your boundaries. Stop being soft suggestions and become firm, non-negotiable lines, where silence becomes your most fluent and powerful language. You don't argue about your peace anymore. You protect it like a sacred flame, quietly, fiercely, without performance. You don't run from connection. No, that's never been the issue. What you refuse now is losing yourself inside it. Because once you've tasted peace, once you've rebuilt yourself from silence, you understand how costly it is to hand that over, just to feel accepted. And if they can't meet you where you are, where depth replaces drama, you'll let them go. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with quiet respect. Because you've learned, you've evolved. You no longer bond through wounds. Pain is no longer your point of connection. You don't need to play the healer to be loved. You've outgrown the exhausting need to be everything for everyone. Now, you choose to be something unshakable for yourself. Whole, rooted, self-contained. That's not cold, that's clarity. And that's the kind of detachment Machiavelli would call strength. It's not ruthless, just wise. Because when you know your value, when you feel it in your bones, you stop negotiating it. You don't twist yourself to be digestible. You don't beg for understanding or approval. Just remain calm, whole, untouched. And in a world addicted to reactivity, that presence alone is radical. Take a look around. The loudest ones are easy to spot. They interrupt. They shout. They crave the last word, the stage, the instant applause. And yes, they win for a moment. They win attention, they win arguments. But what happens after? Because their power depends on being seen, power that relies on. Visibility is power that never lasts. Now shift your focus. Look at the calm ones. They rarely speak unless it's necessary. They don't seek noise or validation. They sit up straighter not from fear, but from something deeper: respect. The calm carry an unspoken weight, not just of voice, but of the mind, the heart, the impulse to react. The calm don't get pulled into every storm. They choose when to act, and when they do, it's deliberate. It's surgical. It doesn't miss, and that's why they last. While others fight for temporary dominance, they're building legacies, while others waste time defending themselves. Calm cuts through the noise. It acts only when the moment calls, and when it does, it's unstoppable. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But the calm don't need to choose. They command both, not by force, but by presence. Because calm isn't emptiness. It's concentrated strength. It doesn't need explanation. And that's why, in the end, the calm one always wins. Not because they shouted the loudest or fought the hardest, but because while others burned bridges, just to prove a point, the calm walked over those same bridges quietly when no one was watching. They didn't panic. They planned. They didn't rush. They studied. And when the storm arrived, they were already 5 steps ahead, not by accident, but by design. Calm is the art of letting fools destroy themselves while you preserve your energy. It's how you rise without stepping on anyone else to do it. In a world built on dopamine, on outrage, on validation, calm is rebellion. Calm is not just stillness, it is precision, discipline, and defiance in a culture that thrives on noise. Calm is strategy. It's the secret weapon of those who have learned to play the long game while others are distracted by momentary sparks, because the calm ones don't win by accident. They win because they never stop seeing beyond the chaos, beyond the impulse, beyond the bait. Even when the world tried its best to blind them with overstimulation and manufactured urgency, that's not silence. That's vision. It's a kind of focused awareness that sees through the fog of distraction. And the truth is, every second something, somewhere is trying to steal your focus. A notification lights up your screen. A headline stirs outrage. A passing glance or a subtle shift in tone pulls you off center. The world is addicted to movement, to controversy, to volume. It races forward with no intention of slowing down. And in that storm, the one who stays still becomes a ghost in the system. Why? Because stillness can't be tracked. It can't be baited or broken. They can't predict you, can't provoke you, can't manipulate you, because you no longer respond to the world's programming. And that makes you powerful in a way most can't comprehend. Stillness is not absence. It's not indifference. It is profound presence. It's the art of standing firm when the ground beneath others crumbles. It's the quiet courage to let others thrash and perform while you simply observe from a place of rooted alignment. Stillness isn't weakness. It's refusing to hand over your energy to chaos just because the world demands a performance. And it unsettles them deeply. Trapped in, but you've unplugged. And that's a different kind of war altogether, one that doesn't demand victory in the traditional sense, but instead protects sovereignty. The moment you stop feeding the fire of reactivity, the flames collapse under their own weight. People panic because they no longer know how to manipulate what doesn't respond. Your stillness becomes a mirror, one they didn't expect. In that silence, they begin to see their own desperation reflected back at them, their chaos, their constant need to be heard, to be validated, to be obeyed. But you remain. Not because you've stopped caring. In fact, it's the opposite. You care so deeply about your internal state that you refuse to hand it over to emotional volatility. You've come to understand, while the world may reward those who are loud, reactive, and confrontational, it is ultimately ruled by those who remain composed. In stillness, you move only when it is truly time to move. You speak not because it's expected, but because it is necessary. Why? Because it's rooted in intention, not impulse. Machiavelli never said, "Make noise." He said, "Make moves quietly." There is a difference. And when everyone else is shouting, that one quiet, Intentional move executed at the right time is what rewrites the entire game, so let them react. Let them demand, scream, protest. You are not in the storm. You are the calm, unmoving center that nothing touches. And that is real power. It's a kind that doesn't fade when the noise dies down. It grows stronger in the silence. Most people spend their entire lives chasing something: validation, revenge, recognition, the illusion of victory. But when you master calm, you stop chasing, you stop searching. You realize you already are the victory. Not because you overpowered anyone, but because you finally stopped needing to. You don't need to prove your worth. You're your own proof. You don't need applause. You walk in silence, and the world adjusts its volume to you. That's the difference. Reactive people demand respect. Calm people command it without raising their voice, without lifting a finger. Just by showing up, fully present, fully still. Because calm is not a pause. It's a posture. Conscious decision to choose alignment over approval. To choose inner peace over external dominance. When someone attacks, you don't flinch.
No.
Don't perform. You don't rush to defend yourself. Instead, you look them straight in the eye and remain utterly still. That stillness, it speaks louder than any words or actions they could throw at you. It says, I see your chaos. I will not become it. I feel your storm, but I will not drown in it. I hear your anger, but I will not echo it. You've become untouchable. Not because you built walls, but because you built depth. Depth in your thinking, in your presence, and in your ability to stay grounded no matter who tries to pull you off balance. This is the moment when you stop being just a player in the game and begin becoming the one who shapes it. Machiavelli taught that control comes from perception, but the deepest form of control comes from self-mastery. Because when others act from fear, you act from clarity. When they move from impulse, you move from purpose. And that is real power. It's not about being louder or faster or more aggressive. It's about being unshaken, even when the noise around you rises to a deafening level. You no longer seek to win the battles defined by others. Instead, you redefine what winning truly means. Not domination, but freedom. Freedom from reaction, from chaos, from the exhausting need to explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding. You don't chase the throne, you become the pillar that supports it. You don't demand attention, you hold space. You don't fight every battle, you outlast the war. Because now you know that victory doesn't come from being seen, it comes from being unbreakable even when no one is watching. That is calm, and that is power. That is exactly who you have become. Now listen closely, because this part is not for the crowd. It's for the few, the rare ones who have made it this far. If you're still here, then you have already begun. You have felt the shift not outside, but deep within, it's a part of you older than your fears, wiser than your wounds, is awakening. You are no longer here to explain yourself, not here to seek permission, not here to play the emotional chessboard of people who never deserved your energy. You are here to govern, not through dominance, but through discipline. Not through noise, but through presence. You are not a reaction. You are an axis. You are not here merely to survive their storms. You are here to become the calm that ends them, and yes, they will try to pull you back with guilt, with drama, with chaos, but you won't move. Not because you're hard, but because you've seen too much to be soft in the wrong places. You don't fight for power anymore, because now you understand real power is not loud. It's not disparity. It's not emotional chaos. It's real power. Breathes slowly, speaks rarely, moves intentionally, and when it moves, the world listens. So walk forward, not to be seen, but to see more clearly. Don't respond. Don't explain. Don't break. Remain. And remember this: the one who governs themselves needs no throne. The one who controls their emotions already rules the world in silence, without warning, without applause, just by standing still while everything else falls apart. Goodbye, architect of calm. Till the next storm.